Bertemu kembali. Laporan Jabatan Statistik sebelum ini dedahkan graduan yang memasuki pasaran pekerjaan mendapat gaji yang lebih rendah pada 2020 berbanding 2019. Malah ada graduan yang dilaporkan yang hanya dibayar gaji minimum pada tahun lepas. Ini berbanding antara RM2,000 dan RM2,500 gaji permulaan pada 2019. Melissa Idris dan Syarat Kutan menerusi program Consider This membincangkan isu tersebut dalam dan juga impak kepada graduan dan pandangan majikan. Perbincangan dilakukan bersama dengan Iman Naja, Wakil Demokrat Kebangsaan dan juga Pengarah Eksekutif Persekutuan Majikan-Majikan Malaysia, Datuk Syamsuddin Bardan, ikuti sedutan pembual berkenaan.
I heard about this a long time ago, even before the pandemic started and I graduated. And now it is proven by a statistic. So I believe that's already a clear proof to show what's going on. And when you are asking that whether there's a difference between those who did so-called professional, traditional degree, even for us, I believe you have heard of National Young Lawyers Movement who advocate for minimum wage for championing students, and that's us in the legal fraternity, in the so-called professional industry, as someone who graduated from LLB, right? So if us, the so-called professional graduates are experiencing this, what more? The rest.
Iman, do you agree? I'm sure you've read comments made by the Minister in the Prime Minister's Department in charge of Economic Affairs, Mustafa Mohamad, saying that graduates should be grateful for a job, even with a low salary. I'm just wondering whether you agree with these statements, and not just him, but made by several other cabinet ministers as well. Are you and your peers just grateful to have a job at this time, regardless of the pay?
All right. Syukur kepada Allah atas nikmat yang diberi, but we question the industry. I'm so grateful that I have an employment that I also want my friends to receive the same, if not better. Hence, this issue of gratefulness shouldn't make us sweep this issue under the carpet. And my personal view, as a youth, as a fresh graduate, I feel that this statement is made in favor of industry players instead of us. The fresh graduates who are nearly at the bottom of the pyramid. Better narratives that should be put forward are the industry and government doing enough with the policies to ensure that employers pay minimum wage to us. Last year, the government announced program subsidi upah under Penjana, which granted 1,200 to companies with less than 75 employees, SME, right? And statistics shows that by April 2020, approximately 248,000 companies had applied for the subsidy. Are things becoming better after the said subsidy was received by the employer? How the subsidy is utilized to ensure that the employees are paid minimum wage with the subsidy received? Did the government, through Ministry of Human Resources, monitor that after the subsidy payout? I know that it sounds like I'm asking why and how a lot, but because in the midst of this craziness that we're in, our future are filled with questions. The thing is, we've been talking about minimum wage, like I said, since before the pandemic started. During the previous government time, people march on the street to ask for minimum wage raise, and we get this 1,200 lah, right? So when we're talking about if the economy recovered, hopefully whether these minimum wage issues will be settled, I believe that it will still be an issue, because if we keep giving leverage years after years, even before the pandemic started and etc., berdolak-dalih tentang isu minimum wage, how can we say that if the economy recover, the economic gap will not be will be better? In my opinion, I know we should be optimistic about the future, or else we will all go crazy this time. But based on my observation, there's a lot that needs to be done first, and it needs to start with addressing the issue instead of adding salt to the wound with all these headlines about the youth who are always not doing enough.
Yeah, of course, last year was, I would say, an exceptional situation where there were a lot of challenges even for employers to sustain their businesses. And of course, that resulted a lot of, I would say, job losses and also trimming down of costs by the employers. And that involved wages costs, things like that. And there were a lot of, I would say, retrenchment were done during that period. And also, the employees, existing employees were given pay cuts and also some other cost-cutting measures. Then, of course, as far as new hires are concerned, that resulted in a downward trend of starting pay, I would say. Yeah.
Samsudin, we just heard from an economist that says that, in fact, if we look at real wages, we've had, for tertiary educated Malaysians, there has been a downward trend since 2010. We're looking at a decade-long downward trend for educated workers. Why do you think this is? Would you agree with that observation, and why do you think that is?
Yeah, basically, of course, if you're looking at starting pay, I would agree with that. But I think we should not be unduly worried about starting pay, because starting pay is just starting pay. It doesn't mean that if you're hired at, say, for example, 1,200 or 1,300 per month, you're going to take that pay forever. Now, of course, we know that in a Malaysian context, employees, new hires are always being put on probation. And of course, normally, many employers, when they confirm the employee concern, they would, of course, review the wages, including, of course, rewarding them with higher wages if they are really showing potential to be, of course, a contributor to the company. No, there is a form of subsidy to the employer's concern. So company will actually pay the actual wages to the employee concerned, and that subsidy will go to the employer specifically. But of course, now when you have that kind of subsidy, you just imagine that even employers require subsidy from the government in order for them to hire and things like that. And of course, this is really challenging for them to really give the real market wages to the employee, say, for example, comparing to 2019 or even earlier than that. And of course, you just can't afford to actually pay those kind of wages to the new hires in 2020. So basically, of course, I say don't be unduly worried about starting pay, because once you are employed, then you would gain experience. And of course, in that kind of situation, you're going to actually be more marketable and more employable. Even if the current company is not able to actually continue employment of this particular employee, he can be likely be employed by other employers. Yeah. Of course, I think what you had mentioned about mismatching is always there. So what is really happening even currently is basically the universities will produce graduates, but they are not really meeting the requirements of the employers, and the employers that actually employ them or hire them need to retrain these people. And of course, during that retraining, you are still considered as an employee. And this is where it is considered really as a cost to the employer, because the employee concerned may not be fully meeting the requirements of the employer. And I would say that this kind of trend to say that universities produce their graduates, they are not employable, and then the employers will train them up to meet their requirements, I think somehow this has to stop, because the capacity of the private sector employers to train up these graduates are very limited, basically.
Tadi itu tadi komen Iman Naja, Wakil Demokrat Kebangsaan dan juga Pengarah Eksekutif Persekutuan Majikan Malaysia MEF, Datuk Samsudin Bardan, berkenaan dengan laporan bahawa graduan tahun 2020 mendapat gaji yang lebih rendah daripada graduan yang masuk kerja pada tahun 2019. Seterusnya, lebih 3,000 artis dan pekerja budaya dalam industri kreatif dijangka terima manfaat menerusi peluang pekerjaan yang disediakan Inisiatif Pemulihan Agensi Pembangunan Ekonomi Budaya Malaysia Cendana berjumlah 10 juta ringgit. Daripada jumlah tersebut, 575 individu menerima geran pembiayaan berkenaan. Ia sebahagian daripada bantuan kewangan sebanyak 150 juta ringgit di bawah Pelan Jana Semula Ekonomi Negara Penjana bagi membantu industri kreatif yang terkesan akibat COVID-19.
Menteri Komunikasi dan Multimedia Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah berkata, bantuan berkenaan akan memberi sinar baharu kepada komuniti seni dan budaya di negara ini selain memastikan industri tersebut kembali bergiat aktif.
Antara bidang-bidang yang menerima manfaat itu ialah program pembiayaan karya kilat, pilihan industri seni kraft, program pembiayaan muzik independen, program pembiayaan seni persembahan, program pemulihan ruang seni, program pembiayaan ketahanan organisasi seni dan program Commission Seni Art in the City. Individu, kolektif, kumpulan dan organisasi yang berjaya menerima manfaat pada hari ini, menerima saiz gerian yang berbeza bergantung kepada aplikasi dan program yang disasarkan.
Beliau berkata demikian dalam majlis pengumuman penerima dana inisiatif cendana di Pusat Seni Persembahan Kuala Lumpur, KLPAC pada Isnin. Jelas Saifuddin, penerima menerima jumlah geran serendah RM3,500 hingga RM150,000 bergantung kepada permohonan dan program pemohon. Sementara itu, Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif Cendana Izan Satrina Muhammad Salihuddin berkata, komuniti seni dan budaya kini melalui proses pemulihan semula dan telah menunjukkan perkembangan positif.
Antara Fimas diterima permohonan sebanyak 1,545 permohonan daripada seluruh negara. Program-program yang tersedia ada, masing-masing ada kemerujukan yang berlainan. Kerana tujuan program tersebut adalah berlainan, saiz grant tersebut juga berlainan.
Dan paparan itu mengakhiri Niaga Awani untuk pagi ini. Teruskan bersama kami di Astro Awani untuk perkembangan dalam dan juga luar negara. Saya Rizal Zulkapli, salam hormat.